In the next few minutes, you would learn how this scholarship awards program began at a picnic in New Hampshire back in 1980. It was a get-acquainted affair for all the Japanese Americans living in the various New England states. When they started socializing, they discovered that they had more in common besides their Japanese heritage. They were all alumni of the National Japanese American Student Relocation Program. What in the world was a student relocation program? What was that all about? Well, like many of you, they were the first generation of Americans of Japanese ancestry from the West Coast. They were Nisei, which in Japanese means the second generation. Their parents had immigrated from Japan starting in the 1880s to help build the railroads, to farm the land, and to seek a better life in this land of opportunity. However, like many new immigrants, they were subjected to a lot of discrimination. Life was not easy for them. When the war started with the bombing of Pearl Harbor by Japan on December 7th of 1941, all persons of Japanese ancestry living on the West Coast were viewed by the American public with suspicion and mistrust. The Hearst Press calls for the removal of all Japanese from America. These scenes illustrate how the Japanese were regarded after the war began. On February 19, 1942, President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, which called for the evacuation and relocation of all persons of Japanese ancestry, regardless of their citizenship, from the West Coast. What followed was the forced removal and confinement in one of 10 concentration camps of over 120,000 people, of which 70% were American citizens by right of birth. The concentration camps were located in remote areas in the state of Utah, Arizona, California, Wyoming, Colorado, Idaho, and Arkansas. First, notices were posted in neighborhoods announcing the evacuation, including instructions on what could be taken for the journey. In San Francisco, the evacuees were given 3 or 4 days to take care of their affairs. The evacuees were registered and tagged like luggage at an assembly point, instructed to take only what they could carry, loaded onto buses or trucks, and sent first to a holding location for a few months, either at state fairgrounds or racetrack, until the permanent concentration camps were built. This is what the temporary housing looked like at a fairground. And this shows a typical row of horse stalls where families were housed at a racetrack, followed by a view of a single unit. When the permanent camps were built, the evacuees were transported by train to the new location. This shows one of the 10 concentration camps, Manzanar, built in the California desert. Every camp was surrounded by a high barbed wire fence and watchtowers, which were manned by soldiers with machine guns. As shown in the news clipping from that time, the future of all persons of Japanese descent in the United States was in limbo. In this environment, the future of college-age students in the concentration camps was bleak. A group of Americans, namely educators on the West Coast, were concerned about the future of the Japanese American minority group. They reasoned that the successful integration of this new minority group into American society depended on having a core of college-educated people who would become the future leaders of this group. They organized like-minded people that included those from all religious groups and service organizations to take up this unpopular cause, which was to get the college-age students out of the concentration camps and back into school. With the help of Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt, the National Japanese American Student Relocation Council was born on May 29, 1942, and the first student was relocated on July 4th of that year. The council processed all necessary paperwork for every student who left the concentration camps for college, and, where needed, raised all funds for tuition from government sources. When the doors of the council closed on June 30th of 1946, over 4,000 Nisei students had been relocated. The promise of the council's work is borne out by the fact that today, the Nisei and their descendants can be found in responsible positions in all segments of our society, in our national and state governments, in academia, in industry, in agriculture, in the arts, and even in professional sports. This was a legacy that all of the Nisei picnickers in New England had in common. They were all successful alumni of the wartime student relocation program. That summer, the so-called boat people of Vietnam were in the news. The plight of the Southeast Asian refugees reminded the picnickers of their own time experience. How wonderful it would be if they, the Nisei alumni of the student relocation program, could, in turn, give aid to the Southeast Asian refugee students, just as they, the Nisei, were helped by people of goodwill unknown to them. At the same time, it presented an opportunity to remember and to honor the National Japanese American Student Relocation Council. Thus, the Nisei Student Relocation Commemorative Fund was born that summer of 1980. A fund drive was started among the Nisei alumni of the Student Relocation Program, and the first award was made in 1982 in Philadelphia to the American Friends Service Committee, who administered the National Japanese American Student Relocation Program. The following are typical scenes from previous awards ceremonies. That is our story. This fund was started by the West Coast Nisei living in New England in 1980, who, during World War II, were disenfranchised by their own government. The men classed 4C in the draft, that is, as undesirable aliens, evacuated from their homes and confined in concentration camps. This fund commemorates the members of the Student Relocation Council for their courage, their determination, their vision and their hope for the future of the Nisei in America. This fund reminds the nation annually through its scholarship program of the shameful period of American history, with the expectation and hope that it would never be experienced by any other minority group. Hopefully, the success of the West Coast Nisei in America, who endured and persevered in spite of the terrible experience during World War II, will inspire all of you. The Nisei have shown that it is possible to overcome devastating experiences and not only survive, but to prosper in this great land.